I'm Brandy Smith in the KHU 11 newsroom. We expect to hear from Texas House Democrats who are in Washington, D.C. anytime now. They're in D.C. after leaving the state on Monday to avoid voting on Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3, two voting-related measures that are making their way through the legislature during this special session. We do know that the Texas Senate passed Senate Bill 1 by a vote of, I had my notes here earlier, 18-4. Earlier today, we also heard from the Texas Senate Republican caucus. As we wait for Democrats to speak in Washington, D.C., let's give a listen to what the author of Senate Bill 1 had to say upon its passage.
Texas offers weekend voting, offers extended hours to vote. Texas leads the nation in opportunities to vote. Those are the facts. Now, what does this bill do to further make it easier to vote in Texas? Under current law, on Election Day, if you're in line when the polls close, you must be allowed to vote. But did you know that that protection is not allowed to folks who vote early? And most Texans today vote early. So Senate Bill 1 says for the first time in early voting, if you're in line when the polls close, you get to vote, no matter how long it takes. What about getting off work to go vote? We've all had concerns about folks who work different hours, multiple jobs. What about helping them? In addition to weekend voting, Senate Bill 1 says this: during early voting, your employer has got to let you off work to vote. We've had that protection for Election Day, but never before for early voting. We're also expanding hours, making them consistent across the state, and very important, under current law, many Texans have their mail ballots thrown out on technicalities. But under Senate Bill 1, for the first time, Texans will have a way to correct those errors so that their votes will be counted. Just a few of the ways this bill improves the process for all Texans. Again, we urge people to look at the provisions of the bill, not the national talking points out of D.C., but what is in the bill. That's what this is about. And we will stay here for as long as it takes and come back as many times as it takes to give these protections to every Texas voter.
The fact is, we can't continue on the process of really getting those done. The House cannot accept bills that we send over under their rules without a quorum. So the work we're doing in case they do come back. But as of now, they cannot accept those bills. So the work we're doing for the people of Texas is being wasted. But this is a tragedy, and it's a tragedy for the people of Texas, and it's an affront to people of Texas that people from Texas would go to D.C. and ask them to bring D.C. to Texas.
A couple more things I want to highlight related to Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3. There would be some changes if the legislature were to pass. So partisan poll watchers would get more protections. There would also be increased ID requirements for vote by mail. For example, voters would need to provide their driver's license number or the last four digits of their social security number. Some other details that primarily affect Harris County because of the methods used during last November's election. Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3 would both outlaw drive-through voting and would require voting to happen inside a building. They would also ban 24-hour voting and ban the distribution of unsolicited mail-in ballot applications. You can read more about these bills on khou.com, but I also want to jump on what Senator Larry Hughes was the author, but Larry Taylor said there at the end, don't D.C. our Texas. That's where the Democrats are right now. They are in D.C., more than 50 of them, to avoid a quorum in the House chamber. The quorum needs 2/3 of its members there to vote, as you heard, to even accept legislation from the Senate. And with more than 50 members gone in Washington, D.C., the House cannot do business. And so that's stalling not just voting reform, but many of the other things that were on Governor Abbott's agenda for this special session that just started on July 8th. This was after the Democrats walked out of the regular legislative session that last day to avoid a vote on the voting issue. So one of the things we've heard from you as we wait for Democrats to come to the podium in Washington, D.C., questions about how this trip is being funded. Where is the money coming from? Our Janelle Bluda looked into that for us.
The House Democrats' trip to the Capitol happened quickly and could turn out to be quite costly, so we want to verify who's picking up the tab. In an interview, Texas Governor Greg Abbott called the trip a taxpayer junket.
Your audience is paying for this junket trip that they're taking to get away from Austin.
And that left many with questions. Laura Short from Friendswood is asking us to verify how much those expenses are, saying we need to see how much taxpayers are spending. So we went straight to the House Democrats themselves for the answers. Our source, Houston Representative Ann Johnson, who is in Washington today.
This is not a taxpayer-funded event. This is a Democratic campaign-funded event.
She says much of the trip is being funded through the House Democratic Caucus, which has a donation link on its website. She says that's in addition to individual campaign funds.
That House Democratic Caucus is paying for this trip, and we are funded by our campaigns. This is a combination of us coming together to recognize that the funds that we have for our campaign are needed to ensure that we can actually keep doing our job for Texans.
Representatives of the caucus also tell us the planes were donated and the hotels are paid for by campaign and caucus accounts. So we can verify the claim is false. House Democrats are not using taxpayer money to fund their trip to Washington. Another donation fund has been created to help support the Texas Democrats, many of whom had their paychecks suspended by the governor last month after their walkout in May. Democrats are now suing the governor over that. With your Verify, I'm Janelle Bluda.
So there are some answers there. We are still waiting for the Democrats to come to the podium in Washington, D.C. We know they've been talking to members of Congress today. The members of the Texas House, who are Democrats and in Washington, D.C., said yesterday that they're there. They will not return to Texas until this special session is over. And their hope is to buy time for Congress to pass H.R. 1. So that's why they're having those conversations with congressional members. I saw a question on our Facebook feed from Alex who said, what are they voting on again? Can you clarify for me? So there are two separate bills making their way through the legislature right now. We have Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3. Independent authors, very similar bills in nature. And what they do, how they would impact voting, really depends on which angle you're coming from, if you're hearing from the Republican caucus or the Democratic caucus. So the Republicans this morning made the case that Senate Bill 1 shores up fraud potential in the voting system, and that Texas has more availability for in-person voting than any other state in the country. Democrats argue that some of the rules related to these bills, ID rules, getting rid of drive-through voting, getting rid of 24-hour voting, that's restricting voting. And so it really depends what your priorities are as a voter, which side you're leaning toward. Obviously, each party is making its case, and Democrats have taken their fight to Washington, D.C. on this one, pushing Congress to pass H.R. 1, a voting reform bill, so that individual states such as Texas can't change the rules of the game as they're playing. I want to look in our Facebook comments to see if there are any more questions while we're waiting for Democrats to come to the podium. Just saw a comment from Becky. She says those people abandoned their responsibility. That is the argument that Republicans are making, that there are many items on the agenda for this special session, and that Democrats, by leaving for Washington, D.C., have negated any progress on any of those issues. Republicans yesterday also welcomed Democrats back to the table and said that this needed to be a collaboration as these bills worked through the legislature. If you're unfamiliar with what's going on, as I wait for Facebook to update, let me catch you up from the beginning. So on Monday night, a group of a couple dozen Texas House Democrats jumped on a couple chartered planes and flew to Washington, D.C. This has precedence. This is something Texas Democrats have done before. Back in 1979, 12 senators did it. And then in 1993, there was a group of House Democrats who ended up going to Oklahoma in all three issues, all three instances, it was related to election and voter issues. So while Democrats are in D.C., they are pushing Congress to pass H.R. 1. They plan to stay until the session is over. August 6th or 7th, Governor Abbott says he will continue to call special sessions, and he can do so through, I believe it's January 2023. Looking through my notes here. Through January 2023, he can continue to call special sessions, and that's why Democrats countered. They knew that going in, eyes wide open, but they were trying to buy time for Congress. Going back to the issue of a quorum, the reason this number, more than 50, is significant is because there are 150 members of the Texas House. It needs 2/3 of those members to be present to get any business done or to accept bills from the Senate. When more than 50 is unavailable, the House doesn't have a quorum and can't push those bills through. You'll remember the Democrats walked out at the end of the session in May, preventing those bills from being passed. Looking through here. Oh, it sounds like we're going to take the live feed from Washington, D.C. Right now, there is not a lot to see. We are waiting for folks to come to the podium to speak. They were supposed to start at 1 o'clock. So you're stuck with me until then. Let me see. Someone said, while there is a session, even a special session, they are getting paid. So yes, it is costing taxpayers money. What's interesting about that, and it hasn't played out in the courts just yet, remember that in response to the Democrats' walkout at the end of May, Governor Abbott vetoed a line in the budget that pays for legislators' salaries. So we haven't seen the financial impact of that, but it's unclear whether they will be paid for their time or how they will be paid. Becky said they need to not get paid. Someone asked how. Deanna, you asked how. If you can clarify what you meant by that, I might be able to provide an answer. I don't have answers for everything, as you might imagine. Peter says, obviously they aren't needed. Time to trim the fat and save the taxpayers some money. The issue right now is that the Texas House does need a quorum to get business done. And so everything that's being passed in the Senate right now, because its members, it has enough members to get business done, nothing can be accepted by the House until a quorum is there to accept it. Sorry, I'm just waiting for Facebook to cycle through so I can get some of your comments and answer anything as we wait for Democrats to take the podium in D.C. They were supposed to start speaking at 1. We do know that they were meeting with congressional members earlier in the day. maybe we can go into the history of this a little bit and Texas's legacy of these kinds of incidents. So back in 1979, a group called the Killer Bees, that was their nickname, they walked out over a couple election-related bills. It was 12 Senate Democrats. The lieutenant governor ordered DPS to go ahead and round them up. Couldn't find them. So when another group in 1993, House Democrats, decided to do something similar over a redistricting plan, 52 House Democrats ended up going to Oklahoma. Now, why that is interesting, and it brings up a whole nother conversation, is about the call to get them back. So Governor Abbott said that they can be arrested, and they can be, if they're in the state. And this is where it gets tricky. So the Texas House, the remaining members yesterday, voted to ask the Sergeant at Arms to call Democrats back. Then they enlist the help of Texas Rangers. Texas Rangers can't make arrests outside of state lines. So the fact that these more than 50 Democrats are in Washington, D.C. complicates that. Also, when they return to Texas, if and when they return, as long as they go willingly, they won't be arrested. We had video yesterday from one of a Houston representative who is currently in D.C., but video from her staff showed a House Sergeant and a Texas Ranger coming by her office, asking her staff if she was there, requesting her presence on the floor, and asking that she, as soon as she returns, to go to the House floor. "15 minutes on, what you're looking at is a live feed from Washington, D.C., where we are waiting for Texas House Democrats to speak. They told us they were going to speak at 1 o'clock, now 1:20. We are, I would say, waiting patiently. In the meantime, as I'm watching our Facebook comments come in, if you're just joining the conversation, ask questions. What I know, I can share with you. I can also find articles that might be able to dive deeper and answer some of your questions. About to get going. We're going to bring that to you in just a moment. As soon as we can get that feed routed.
In support and asking us to continue to work hard to protect our freedom to vote. And we are inspired by the generations who came before us to do exactly what we are having to do again right now. With that, I'm gonna say a few words in Spanish for our Spanish media market. Mi nombre es Victoria Nieves, soy representante estatal de Dallas, represento partes de Dallas, Garland y Mesquite, y aquí estamos con representantes estatales, senadores del estado de Texas, que representamos desde Dallas, Fort Worth, a Austin, San Antonio, El Paso, el Rio Grande Valley, and Houston también. Y nosotros sabemos que los esfuerzos del Partido Republicano para tratar de derrotar nuestro voto están tratando de hacer todo lo que pueden porque ellos miraron que los números de los votos latinos eran los números más altos que hemos visto en años. Y nosotros vamos a seguir luchando para nuestra comunidad. Lo que ellos están haciendo es un asalto en nuestra democracia. Los republicanos tienen la intención de quitarles la libertad del voto. Ellos están decididos a quitarle ese derecho y sabemos que ellos no se detendrán. Pero nosotros, demócratas legislativos, no nos rajamos y vamos a seguir luchando para proteger el voto latino en el estado de Texas. Y aquí estamos porque queremos que pasen el John Lewis Voting Rights Act y también el Pueblo de la Ley, the For the People Act. Y queremos que el Congreso Federal, necesitamos protecciones federales del nivel federal para proteger el voto de los derechos latinos en Texas. Y muchísimas gracias. No nos dejamos y vamos a seguir luchando para nuestra comunidad. It's my honor to introduce the chair of the Senate Hispanic Caucus, a senator from San Antonio, one who's been advocating in the fight, Senator Jose Menendez.
Thank you, Representative Niave. Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. A lot has been said, but I'm going to try to keep it short, and I'm going to try to put a face on this issue. Many of us have stories of immigrant parents or grandparents, but few of us get to hear of the time when your father and your mother had recently been married, and your father's painting the house in Mission, Texas, and the Border Patrol rolls up, and by the time Mama comes out with a limonada que le traía papá, ya casi they had him in the back of the car. All because his wallet was inside. The reason I share this story is because as soon as my parents could become naturalized U.S. citizens, they never missed an election. Not one election. And I can tell you that as a child, I had to go with them, and it became a family event. And so I can remember the little fire station close to the house with the little curtains that you drew and las palanquitas, the little levers that you pulled. I can remember all the different ways as it changed. And as it changed over the years, and as mamá y papá se hacían más viejos, they got older, they needed more help. It's the very reason why MALDIF and the NAACP testified that there's a federal assister law in place today. That in my opinion, and in their opinion, the bill that's being proposed breaks federal law. The federal law says that anyone can request anyone to assist them, and they're not required to present any oath or testify who they are. So we also had disabled members of the community come and testify before me, a mother and daughter, right in front of me, 8 hours that I sat through the testimony, and I don't serve on the committee of jurisdiction. I sat in as a guest, and I heard the pleas to not make the disabled community potentially criminals. Because the mother said, we can't take an Uber. They need vans with those ramps. They said, we take people that aren't related to us because the disabled community is very unified. And now we're going to have to write some oath and tell them who we are and potentially be at risk of being accused of influencing someone's vote. Folks, at the end of the day, ask yourselves this. After the Attorney General invested 22,000 staff hours to investigate and could only come up with 16 alleged incidences of fraud out of 11 million votes cast, ask yourselves, why are we doing this? That's right. This is a solution in search of a problem to solve. Right. I wish they had this same vigor and venom and desire to solve mass shootings. How many mass shootings have we had in this country? Why aren't we changing laws to fix that? There are so many issues. Why haven't we fixed the electric grid in Texas? Why haven't we expanded Medicaid in Texas? These are some of the things that we're here to discuss. We're not here on vacation. If anyone thinks this is a vacation, let me help you out with your definition. Because I'd much rather be home with my family. But we're here to do a job to represent the millions of men and women, whether they be disabled, whether they be minorities, whether they be recent immigrants, whether they be whatever, who may have their right to vote infringed upon. Folks, they ask, how much voter fraud are you willing to put up with? The question's not, that's not the question, is how many people are you willing to rob them of their vote?
Amen. Thank you. Well done.
Oh, sorry. Next, we represent Representative Vicki Goodwin from Austin, Travis County.
All right, Vicky.
Thank you. The rights of voting Texans live on borrowed time under Texas Republicans. We are here to implore Congress to pass sweeping voting rights legislation. We heard from over 400 constituents back in Texas who came to testify about the elections bill. Their stories fell on deaf ears among the Republicans. Please don't let our pleas fall on deaf ears here in Congress. We have sacrificed a lot to be here. Many of us have left family, spouses, children, loved ones that we take care of. And so this is a sacrifice. We've left our businesses. We are doing everything in our power to fight back. We are not going to allow Governor Abbott to corral and cabin us. We are here to fight. And with that, I will turn it over to Chair Turner to take some questions.
Good job, Vicki. Thank you. Thank you, representatives and senators, for your powerful words. And you see here today the unity we have. And I should note, before we open for a few questions, we have several more members who are still in meetings on the Hill right now, meeting with U.S. senators and making the case. There's members attending a subcommittee hearing on voting rights this afternoon as well. So our members are working hard all over town this afternoon. We'll take a few questions.
How much money has been raised to support this? And are you all spending anything out of pocket, or is this all being supported by donors?
Yeah, Todd, appreciate the question. First off, all this is entirely funded through donations. Our caucus and all the caucuses raise money, except when we're in session, when we're obviously not allowed to do so. We're able to raise money now, and we're actively raising money to be able to support transportation, lodging, the necessities while we're away from Texas. But certainly, yes, members are incurring costs out of pocket, absolutely. And so there's no doubt both things are happening.
And you're not collecting any kind of state per diem for your service here?
Yeah. No, and our those per diems are paid out at the end of the month. So that would be still several weeks away, and I anticipate members are going to decline that.
Well, part of the reason I ask is, how long can you guys hold out? I mean, are you all going to stay in Washington through the end of this special session?
So, Todd, our commitment in the House Democratic Caucus is that we are going to stay out until this session is over to kill this bill. And we're going to use the intervening time to shine a harsh national spotlight on the Republican vote suppression efforts and use that pressure to encourage and urge and implore Congress, specifically the U.S. Senate, to pass H.R. 1, the For the People Act, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And so that's our stated goal. It's been our goal since we left on Monday, and that remains our goal today.
Representative Turner, as you raise money, you indicate that's the goal. What happened if that money is not there at the end of the day? What's the plan in that situation?
Well, we're not worried about it. We're not worried about it.
We'll pay for it.
Yes.
Who else are you meeting with in the Senate, and are you seeing any progress in? You said you were imploring Congress. Are you seeing progress in that?
Well, we think so. The feedback we're getting is that our meetings have been productive and have refocused attention on this issue, and that's been helpful to the process in Washington. Yesterday, and there's a lot of meetings, so I don't know that I have the complete list in my head right now, but yesterday members met with Majority Leader Schumer, with Senator Padilla, Senator Booker. There's a meeting with Senator Gillibrand this afternoon. There's a meeting with Senator Warren this morning, Senator Klobuchar, and some other senators as well, and Senator Warnock as well today.
Are you meeting with senators? You met with senators who are sympathetic
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we would welcome the opportunity to meet with Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz and urge them to get off the sidelines and join the fight for democracy, and urge them to use their positions of prominence in the Republican Party to push back on the big lie. Their voices are important, and it would be important for Senator Cruz and Cornyn and Governor Abbott, for that matter, to tell Republicans that it is a lie that there was widespread voter fraud, that some of the election was stolen from Donald Trump. If they were real leaders, that's what they would do. But so far, they've been quiet, and they're not willing to tell the truth to their supporters. So we're going to meet with any senator we can, and we're going to meet with senators who agree with us, senators who disagree with us, and senators who want to help but haven't figured out the right way to help yet. So we're going to meet with all the above. Last question.
The White House press secretary just said about an hour ago that there were no details on a legislative strategy on voting rights laws. You mentioned the meeting with the vice president. Have they told you anything that they're not telling us?
Well, if there was, we couldn't tell you. Look, we had a very good meeting with the vice president. I haven't seen the press secretary's comments, so I can't speak to that. But what I can say with confidence is that in every meeting we have had, I think we have all been assured there is a 100% commitment to achieving federal action on voting rights and doing it as soon as possible. We are making the case it has to happen now. We're at a crisis point in Texas and elsewhere in the country. It has to happen now, and that's the message we're going to continue to drive home. Thank you. Actually, that's not true. I was in a meeting with Senator Manchin a few weeks ago, and there'll be other meetings ahead. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, man.
Senator Blanco, how do you feel about this?
No. Let's get away from it.
Senator Alvarado?